The shadow vaults, how the luxury black market steals and fakes our history. Imagine owning a piece of history, a rare archival Chanel piece, a vintage designer trunk that once crossed oceans, or a masterpiece guarded in a private collection. It's worth a small fortune, but one night it vanishes. No broken glass, no alarms, just an empty space on a velvet shelf. By morning, the item is halfway across the world. In a few weeks, it will sit on a shelf in plain sight, accompanied by papers that look 100% authentic, bought by a collector who has no idea they own stolen property. Welcome to the hidden underside of the luxury and vintage world, a multi-billion-dollar shadow economy built on sophisticated heists, high-stakes forgery, and a black market so organized it rivals international cartels. Today, we are opening the vault to see how rare items disappear, how masters of deception recreate them, and who is actually hunting them down. To understand why criminals are risking everything for handbags, art, and rare collectibles, we first have to look at how the market changed. Over the last decade, vintage and archival luxury shifted from a niche hobby to an aggressive asset class. Rare pieces from legendary houses don't just hold their value, they outperform stocks. When a rare 1990s designer piece or a limited edition accessory becomes a status symbol worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, it stops being fashion. It becomes currency. And where there is high-value currency, organized crime isn't far behind. Unlike traditional art thefts, where famous paintings are hard to fence because everyone knows what they look like, luxury vintage items, rare leather goods, and high-end collectibles are a dream for thieves. They are portable, easily disguised, and universal. But stealing them is only half the battle. The real genius and the real crime happens after the theft. What happens when a thief steals a unique, heavily documented piece that can't be sold openly? They don't just sell it, they erase it and recreate it. Or worse, they build an identical twin. Meet the shadow artisans. These aren't low-tier counterfeiters making cheap knockoffs in back alleys. These are master craftsmen who study the history of materials. To forge a vintage luxury piece from decades ago, you can't just use modern materials. You need hardware made from the exact same metal alloys used in the 1980s. You need leather sourced from deadstock tanneries of that specific era, artificially aged to mimic decades of natural wear. You even need to replicate microscopic flaws, because perfection is the #1 sign of a fake to an expert eye. Investigators tracking these networks have found entire underground workshops equipped with vintage stitching machines, custom-milled brass stamps, and chemical treatments designed to fool even the most advanced authentication technology. When a stolen item enters this pipeline, it is stripped, altered, or used as a template to flood the gray market with terrifyingly accurate replicas. The original disappears into a private underground collection, while clones are sold to unsuspecting buyers through high-end resale platforms.
So who stops them? When a multi-million-dollar collection vanishes, standard police forces often don't have the resources or the specialized knowledge to track it across international borders. That's where private art and luxury detectives step in. Unlike what you see in movies, these investigators don't usually kick down doors in a hail of gunfire. They spend their days behind screens, monitoring encrypted messaging apps, crawling private collector forums on the dark web, and tracking supply chains across customs databases. They look at the digital footprints, a serial number scraped off a piece of hardware, a distinct stitch pattern visible in a background photo posted by an anonymous seller in Tokyo, a customs declaration discrepancy between Milan and Dubai. One prominent investigator described the work as archaeology in reverse. You aren't digging up the past to preserve it. You're tracking a living ghost through a maze of shell companies, proxy buyers, and encrypted cryptocurrency wallets. Which brings us to the darkest open secret of this industry: Why do buyers keep looking the other way? In many cases, the ultimate consumers of stolen or heavily doctored vintage items are elite collectors who operate on a strict code of discretion. If an item is rare enough and the discount is sweet enough, some buyers stop asking questions about provenance. They don't want to know where the piece was 3 years ago. They just want to own what nobody else can have. This demand creates a self-sustaining ecosystem. As long as wealthy buyers value exclusivity over legality, the shadow vaults will continue to operate. The items we wear, collect, and display tell a story about who we are. But beneath the polished glass of auction houses and the glossy feeds of online archives lies a relentless war between those who preserve history and those who treat it as loot. The next time you look at a flawless, rare vintage piece, remember, you might not just be looking at fashion. You might be looking at a ghost story. What do you think drives people to risk everything for these rare items? Let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe for more deep dive investigations into the shadows of the luxury world. And as always, stay curious.